Hello YouTubers, I'm Parvez and welcome to my Modern JavaScript tutorial for beginners. So this will be a one video that we are going to learn about ES6, ES7 and also ES8 features in JavaScript. So first of all, what is ECMAScript? So now ECMAScript or ES is a scripting language specification standardized by Ecma International. Now it was created to standardize JavaScript, and also JavaScript has remained the most widely used implementation of the ECMAScript since the standard was first published. Now there are different versions of ES in the JavaScript. So now let me just introduce some of them. So after 1997, so the first ES release was in 1997 and it was ES1. After that we have ES2, ES3, so and ES4 was abandoned, and after that we had ES5. The ES5 was released in 2009, and after ES5 another new version was ES6. Now the ES6 version was with the release of the ES6, JavaScript made a big achievement in the way of modern programming in JavaScript. So after that we had after ES6 we had ES7. It was in 2016, ES8 2017, ES9. Also, I think also we have ES10 and with ES11. But in this video particularly, we are going to just focus on the ES6, ES7 and also ES8 features. So now let's get started. In this part we are going to talk about variable declaration in JavaScript. So before ES6, if you want to declare a variable, you need to use var keyword. Now the var is globally scoped, the var declaration is globally scoped, and also the var declaration is blocked scoped, or we can call it function scoped. So for example, if you are saying var num to 10, and after that I'm going to just create a function. I call the function add, and in here I need to create a var num1 to 20. Now you can see that this is globally defined, and in here we have this variable inside our function block, inside this curly braces, and it is in the blocked scope. Now if you want to console.log num, let me just do this, and if you see the result, okay, so sorry, we need to call our add function in here, and now if I run this, you can see I'm receiving 10 in here. Now if I say num1, and you can see I'm receiving 20. Also, one of the most issues with the declaring var is this, that for example, if you have a variable in here, let me just show you by example. If I have var a and I want it should be 20, and if I say console.log a, obviously we will receive 10 in here. So if I run this, you can see it's 20, sorry, you can see we are receiving 20. But the problem is here that now you can, using var, you can declare this variable. For example, I'm going to say var a to 30, and if I say console.log a, and if I run this, you can see I'm receiving 30 and 20, and I have not received any error for this. Now in ES6, two new features, or we can call it two new declaration for the variable introduced. So the first one is let, and the second one is const. Let and const are blocked scoped. Now let me show you first the example of let. For example, I'm going to just create a let num, and I want it should be 5. Now I'm going to just create an if condition. So if num is less than 6, I'm going to just create let, so sorry, if num is great, okay, if num is greater, if num is less than 6. Okay, now let me just create let greeting, and I'm going to say hello like this. Okay, now if I say console.log greeting, you will see that I'm receiving hello in here like this. Okay, now if you want to access this outside the scope, so right now the greeting is declared inside our this scope. Now if you want to access this in here, and if you can see I'm receiving greeting is not defined in here. Another best thing about the let is that you cannot redeclare a variable. For example, let me just comment this. For example, if you say let greeting in here again, and this time you want to say world, and if you run this, you will see you're receiving a syntax error, and it's telling that greeting has already been declared. Now, but you can update or assign the value of greeting. For example, if you remove this let, now I've declared the variable, now I want to change the value of this variable or update the value of this variable with the world. Now there's no problem, you can do this. Now if you run the refresh this, you can see I'm receiving world. Now in another way we have const. Now const is also a blocked scope, and let me just show you the example of const. For example, I have const num25. Let me just show you the let example, and okay, now in here I'm going to just say if num is less than 6, I'm going to just create another const. I call it greeting, and I say hello like this. Now if you say console.log greeting, and if you see the result, so you can see we're receiving hello, there's no problem. But if you want to access this greeting, const greeting outside the scope, so let me just add this in here, and if you refresh this, you can see we're receiving that greeting is not defined. But also you cannot let me just copy the greeting in here, and let me remove this, comment this. Okay, now in the let we have said that you can say greeting and you can change the value to the world like this, but in const you can not do this. So if I say const greeting, if I refresh this, you can see I'm receiving greeting has already been declared, so we cannot do this. This was available in var. But if I remove this const, and now if I refresh this, again I'm seeing error because it's telling me that assignment to constant variable, we cannot assign a new value to the constant variable like this. Okay, so this was a simple example on let and also const. In this part we are going to talk about ES6 template literals. So template literals are an improvement on string concatenation. So now let me just show you a simple example. For example, I have let name, and I have let lname. Okay, now in the past, if you want to concat these two variables together, you need to use plus. So now let me just show you. For example, let me say let full name, and I want to concat these two variables. I'm going to say that my name is, and you can add plus sign name, and my lname is, you can add plus sign in here, lname, and after that you can console.log full name. Okay, now if you see you will receive your full name. So this is my name is this, and this is my last name. Now using template literal, you can do this also in a good way, in a good manner. Let me just create let full name in here, and you can simply use my name is. Now for adding backtick, for adding template literal, the first thing you need to add a backtick. So let me just remove this, for example. Okay, so you need to add backtick like this, and in here you need to write my name is, and after that with the $sign you need to add your variable. So name, my name is, and my name, let me just say last name is, and you need to add $sign, and after that you need to add your variable, that's name, like this. Now you can see that using this way, this is so good way. Now let me just refresh my refresh this. You can see now the result is the same. My name is this and my last name is this. But this way is the good way that you can use the template literals in ES6. Now let me just show you another simple example in here. For example, let me just remove this. I have a function like this, and this function name is display, and I'm going to pass a name as a parameter. Now let me just return this name, and I'm using template literal, and I'm going to add $sign in here and name. Now I want to convert my this name to uppercase. You can simply write to name dot to upper case like this, and now you can simply say console.log, and you can add your display in here, and you need to pass. You can see I'm adding lowercase name. Now if I refresh this, you can see that it is converted to uppercase using template literal. So like this you can use template literals in JavaScript. In this part we are going to talk about REST operator or REST parameters. So REST operator signifies that parameter is a placeholder for any number of arguments. Now the REST operator is used for handling function parameters, and the best thing about the REST operator is this, that REST operator is a type of an array. So now let me just show you an example that what I mean from this. For example, I have a function, so let me first do it that in the past JavaScript. So for example, if you have a function that's called myNumbers, and we are going to add nums in here. Now we are going to just console .log nums. Now if I call my numbers, and if I add, for example, 8, and you can see the result will be 8 like this. Okay, now if I add another parameter in here, for example 9, 10 or 2, now if I see, you can see I'm receiving just 8. Now in the past you can use arguments to do this, so you can just simply use, let me just instead of doing this, you can just use arguments. And now if you see, you'll receive the arguments in here, and now the problem is this, that it's not a type of array, it's the Protos object, and it's not iterable. Now when it comes to ES6 JavaScript, we have REST operator in here, or REST parameter. So now let me just show you the example of this, or let me just uncomment this. Okay, bring it back. Now you can use 3 dots in here, and let me just use nums, and if you see, you can see now we are receiving our parameters in here, and the best thing is this, that the proto is array and you can iterate over this array. Now if you add more in here, so 4 5 6, and you can see there's no problem and we are receiving these parameters. So it's a powerful feature, the REST operator, and you can use this. And this was about the REST operator in ES6, JavaScript ES6. In this part we are going to talk about the separate operator. So separate operator is used with arrays, and it is used to split the content of an array, and also it has the same syntax as the REST operator. So now let me just show you an example. For example, we have let A, let me just give it 1 2 3 4 5, and also I have let B 6 7 8 9. Now you can use let me just create another let C, and in here you can you can combine these two arrays together, so like this. Okay, now if I say console.log C, and if you see now we can see we have up to 9 our numbers, and we have done this. Okay, now let me just show you another example. For example, we have let hello, and this is an array. We have hello and we have world, so it's an array. And now if you console.log hello, and now if you see, you can see that we have the hello world array in here. Now using separate operator you can split these, so you can simply say console.log hello, and if you see, now it's not like array, and we have thrown this out of the array. We have our hello world. Also sometimes, for example, you need to convert a string into list of characters. It's also useful to use separate operator. For example, in here I have let name. Let me add my name. Now if you console.log this name, and you see that we have our name in here. Now we can separate this name, so you can simply use console.log, and we are using separate operator, and name. Now you can see the characters are isolated. So also you can use separate operator with the object. So for example, you have two objects and you want to copy one object into another object. Also you can use, for example, I have let obj1, and in this object I have for example name, and also I have last name. So last name, and I have another object let obj2, and in here I have email. So also I have a phone, so let me just add a phone in here. Now in here you can copy this using separate operator, so you can just simply say dot obj1, and now if you console, okay, if you console.log obj2, you'll see that we have copied the obj1 to obj2. So you can see we have email, phone, and like this, and you can see the proto is object. So like this you can use with the separate operator in JavaScript. In this part, we are going to talk about the default parameters in JavaScript, how you can use multiple default parameters, and also how you can pass an expression as a default parameter in JavaScript. So first, let me just create a function in here. I call it add, and I'm going to pass two parameters in here. So in this section, let me just return a plus b. Okay, now let me just console.log call my add function, and if I add two values, obviously we will receive 11. 6 plus 5 is, sorry, console, we have an error. Okay, so now if I refresh, you can see I'm receiving 11. But for example, if I say console.log add, and I'm going to just add one parameter in here, so for example 7, and if I run this, you can see I'm receiving none in here. Now by adding a default parameter, this problem will be solved. So for the b, I'm going to just add 6. So now if I refresh my page, you can see I'm receiving 13. So like this, you can add default parameter. Also, you can add multiple default parameters. So for example, I'm going to just write function add and a, b, and for the b I'm going to give 3, and for the c I'm going to just give it 5, and now you can simply return a plus b and times c. Now if I say console.log and call my add function in here, now for the first I need to specify, for example, I'm going to add 3, but because I have a default parameter in here, there's no problem. And if I see the result, you can see I'm receiving 18. And if I say console.log add, and if I add the parameter, for example 2, 3, and 1, you can see I should receive 6. I should receive 5. Let me refresh this. You can see I'm receiving 5. So like this, you can add multiple default parameter in JavaScript. Also, you can pass an expression, for example, in as a parameter in JavaScript. So let me just show you. For example, I have a const entry function, and I'm going to just add a name parameter in here, and let me just add entry date. So for this, I'm going to just use new date like this. Okay, so this is the default parameter for my this function. Now I'm going to just console .log, and let me use template literals in here using backticks. Okay, so date of entry, and in here I'm going to just pass the entry date dot get full year. So dot get full year. Okay, now in here if I call, so first let me just call entry my function, and let me just add, because in here we have name, so we need to pass the name as a parameter. And so first let me just define a new date, and let me just add, for example, 2019 10 20. And another one is, I'm going to just pass a name in here, so for example John Doe, and I don't want to pass any date in here because I have a default parameter in this section. So if I see, you can see that this is the parameter that I have specified, but this is the default that we have already added at the top. So like this, you can work with JavaScript default parameter. In this video, I'm going to show you that how you can use for off loop in JavaScript. So for of loop is an enhanced version of for in, or we can call it for each loop. So in the past, for example, if we have const names, for example, I have an array and I want to iterate over this array. So let me just create my array like this. Okay, now if you want to iterate over this array, you need to use for. So you can simply say for let I equal to 0 and I is less than names dot length, like this, and I plus plus. If you see console console.log names I, you'll see that I'm receiving my array in here like this. Okay, but now this syntax is converted in ES6. You can use for off loop. So now let me just show you. Let me first comment this in here. Okay, using for off, you can simply say so for let name of names, and you can simply console.log the name. And if you see, we are receiving the same result. But you can see in here, first we need to say let I is equal to 0, and after that we need to check that if that our I is less than the length of our array, and after that we need to increment the value of I, and like this. So we but in here you need to just use for let name of names, and you can do the same. So and you can receive the result. Also you can, for example, if you want to you want to for example get the index of an array, also you can do for this. And for off loop we have entries. Using entry we can do this. So you can just simply say for let name of names dot entries. So this is a function, entries function, and you can simply say console.log name, and if you see the result, you can see that we have like this, we have the index, and also we have our array. So like this you can use for off loop in JavaScript ES6. So JavaScript in the past had 5 primitive types: number, string, boolean, null, and undefined. So in ES6, a new primitive type has been introduced called symbol. Now the symbol type doesn't have a literal form, and symbol is completely a unique identifier. Also we can say that symbols are tokens that serves as a unique IDs. Now you can use a symbol factory function for creating a symbol. So let me just show you the example. You can simply use const symbol, and you can use symbol like this. So you can create this symbol. Now also if you want to, for example, set a description, an optional description, you can set for symbol in here. So for example, we have let name, and this is symbol. So I have said that it is just a token or a unique ID. It does not have a literal form. So for example, name, let me just give it name, and the another one we have let l name. So let l name symbol, and we can say l name like this. Okay, now if you want to get for example to the description value, you can use toString function. Now when you're going to call console.log, now it explicitly called a toString. So you can simply say console.log and this for example name, and you can say console.log lname. Now if you see, you can see we have symbol, so we have, it's the lname and also the name. Also you can use the type of operator to check whether a variable is a symbol. So you can just use console.log, for example, type of name. So it is the ES6 syntax for finding the type of a variable. So now if you check, you can see that it is a symbol, it's type of a symbol. Also, as I have said that every symbol is a unique ID, create a unique ID. Now every symbol returned by symbol is unique, and every symbol has its own identity. So if we check this symbol with this symbol, you'll receive false because they are not the same and they have their own unique identity. So let me just show you. For example, console.log name and lname. Now if you see, you can see we are receiving false. In this part I'm going to talk about the arrow function. So there are three different ways that you can define a function in JavaScript. We have named function that you will be familiar with that. We have anonymous function that also you will be familiar with. And the new syntax for the function, or the new feature for the function that was introduced in JavaScript ES6, that is arrow function. So first let me just recap the two functions. For example, first we have function name. You can just say named function display and let me add a parameter, and you can simply say console.log name, and if you call your function in here and add a name in here, you can see that we are receiving our name in here. So this is called a name function. Another function is an anonymous function that if you are a JavaScript developer, you will be it will be familiar for you. So for example, let me just create const display, and we have a function, and let me add the name parameter in here, and you can simply say console.log the name, and you can just call your function and add a name in here. So for example, John Doe, and if you see, the result will be the same. Now this new syntax for the JavaScript is arrow function. Now an arrow function is like an anonymous function, and it can also be passed as argument to another function. So let me just show you the example of this. For example, let me just create a const display. So let me work with this. Okay, now in here you can use this, and after that you need to use an arrow. So this is called arrow function, and after this you can write your statement. So for example, I'm going to just console.log and say hello world. Okay, now if I call my display function in here, and if you see, I'm receiving hello world in here. Now you can make it more better. So because in here we have just one statement. Now when you have one statement, you don't need to add these curly braces. Now you can remove this, and you can just cut this and paste it in here. You can see now our just function is in one line of the code. Now if you run this, you can see we're receiving the same result. Also you can pass a parameter. So for example, if you want to pass a parameter, also you can do, let me just show you const display I have, and in here I'm going to just say name, and I can say console.log, and let me just use template literals in here using backtick, and I'm going to say that welcome name. Okay, Now if I call my display and pass a parameter, for example, let me add my name in here, and if you refresh this, you can see that I'm receiving welcome Paraways. Now also you can pass a function as arguments to an arrow function. So and here we have just used a variable. Now you can also pass a function as argument and parameter of the arrow function. So for this, first let me just show you through the anonymous function, and after that we are going to work on arrow function. So if you use anonymous function for this, for example, if you want to add a function as a parameter or argument in anonymous syntax of the function of the JavaScript, let me just say set timeout, and in here I'm going to just create a function like this, and now let me just add 2000 2 millisecond, and in here I can just say console.log and I'm going to say that hello function like this. Okay, now if I okay, now if I run this, so let me just run this, you'll see that after 2 seconds we are receiving hello function. So this was using anonymous function. Now we are going to change this with the syntax of the arrow function, and we are going to do this in arrow function. So let me just comment this. Okay, now in a row function, you can see we have 1, 2, 3 lines of code. Now in a row function you can do this just in one line of the code. You can just say set timeout and like this, and you need to add your arrow function and you need to add your statement. For example, I'm going to just say hello row arrow function, and after this you need to set the timeout, so 2000 millisecond. Okay, now if I run this, you can see that after 2 milliseconds I'm receiving hello arrow function. Now you can see we have 1, 2, 3 lines of code, but in arrow function we have just converted this to the one line of code. So we have saw arrow functions. Now in this part we are going to talk about the multi-line arrow functions, how you can use multi-line arrow functions in JavaScript. So let me just create an example. First I'm going to use anonymous function. So for example, I have a const factorial, and I have an anonymous function in here, and let's product to 1. And now I'm going to just create a for loop. So for int I 1, I is less than, also I need to pass a parameter. Let me just give it n less than n and I plus plus. And in here let me just return my product, and in here I want to multiply the product with my I value from the for loop. Okay, so now this was using we have used multi-lines in this function. Now if you call your factorial in here, and if you so first let me just do console.log factorial, and for example I'm going to add 3 in here. Now if you see unexpected identifier console.log function, sorry guys, so because I'm using more programming language, so I have given int in here, but it's not in, it's let. Okay, so now if you see, you can see that I have received 2. Now if you change this to 4, let me just check this, you can see we have received 6 in here. Now we are going to do this using arrow functions, how you can convert this. So in a row function, you can simply use, for example, const factorial, and we are going to just pass n in here, or for example product, whatever you want, and let me just add n in here. And now I can just use a row function. Let product, let me just create 4. So for let I to 1, I is less than equal to n, and I plus plus. Okay, now you can just simply say product times times I. Okay, now we need to just return our product in here. Now if I call my console.log my factorial function in here and add 5, you can see that I am receiving the same result, but in here I have used multiline arrow functions, that we have a multiline in here. So like this you can use arrow functions, multiline arrow functions in Java. In this part we are going to talk about the REST operators, using of REST operators in arrow functions, and also how you can add default parameters in arrow functions. So if you remember in the first parts of the video, I have talked about the REST operators, so that using REST operators you can add a number of parameters to your functions. Now we are going to just recap that. For example, if I have a function display, and using .n, so this is the syntax of the REST operator. Now if I say console.log n, and if I call my display function in here and add n number of parameters, now if I run this, you will see that I'm not receiving an error, and this will be the result. Now we are do this with the arrow function. So let me just create const display, and this is an arrow function. Now in here you can use .n. If I say console.log n, and if I call my display function here, now I can add n number of parameters to my this arrow function. And now if I refresh, you can see that this is the result. Now the another topic that we are going to talk is that using default parameters in our arrow functions. So I have done this in the first parts, but that was not using arrow functions. Now for example, I have a const display power, so I'm going to display the power of a number using JavaScript. So now I'm using a row function, and I'm going to just add 2 parameters. So the first one, we need to specify this is the n, or we can call it number, and the second one is the exponential. So for this I'm going to add a default value of 2 in here. Now I'm using arrow functions, and we are using mat from the JavaScript library .po. And in here you need to add your n and also exponential. Okay, now so you can just I don't need to add this because okay. So now if I call my display power, first let me do console.log and display power. So the first time I'm going to just add 2 to the power of 3. Okay, and if I refresh, I should receive 8. So you can see the result is 8. Now if I don't add any parameter, if I don't add the second parameter, so display power, for example, I'm going to just add 2 in here, and if you see in here, this is a default parameter that we have already specified. Now if I run this, I should receive 4 for this. Now you can see that I am receiving 4. So like this you can use default parameter with the arrow function. In this part we are going to talk about destructuring object. So first of all, what is destructuring? So destructuring is used for unpacking values from an array or an object. Particularly in this video we are going to do destructuring on object. So let me just show you an example. For example, we have a const an object, so let me call it personal info, and in here in the object I have a name, so I have a ill name. Also I have my email. For example, let me just give an email. Also I have a phone. Okay, now so in the past when we want to, for example, if you want to access the item of name or real name, you need to do like this. So for example, const I am going to say first name, and I can just say personal info dot name, and also we have a const, for example, lname personal info dot lname. Now you can just simply say console.log first name, and also console.log lname. If we see, we will receive the result and there will be no problem. So let me just, you can see that I have received the first name and also my last name, but you can see that we are duplicating the code. First we are going to create first name, and we need to use personal info.name or lname. Now using destructuring, it is so simple and easy. So now let me just show you the example of destructuring. So you can just simply use, for example, I'm going to just create a const, and I want to just say name, and I want to assign this to the personal info. Now if I say console.log name, you'll see that I am receiving the name. You can see that this is the name. So let me just use template literals in here using let me add backticks. So my name is name. Okay, now you can see that we are receiving my name is this. Okay, you can do so for example, if you want to do lname, and you can just say let me just say last name, and we can add the lname. So now if you see, you can see that I am receiving this is my name and this is my last name. Also you can assign the value. For example, for the name I want should be n, and for the l name I want it should be ln. Now I can change these to n and also ln, and you will see that I am receiving the same result. There's no problem. And also you can do for the email, you can just simply add the email in here, and you can just say, for example, email, and this is my email. So like this we can do object destructuring in JavaScript. Okay, now let me just show you the destructuring of an array. So we have saw object destructuring. Now we are going to work on the arrays. So for example, first of all, let me just create a function here, const display info, and this is just a function, a JavaScript function, and now this function just return an array. So let me just say name, for example, last name, and also for example an email, like this. Okay, so now if you want to do destructuring on this array, so it is so simple and easy. For example, you can just say let name, and you need to use your display info, call your display info function in here. Now if I say console dot log my name, so and now let me just see the result. You can see that this is my name, and for example, if you want to say another one, for example, this was name, you can say l name, and in here you can just do last name, and you can add your L name in here, and the result will be the same. So you can see we have our L name and we have our last name. So also you can do with the email. Let me just do so you can add email in here, and let me just say email, and you can simply use your email in here. Now if you see, we are receiving the same result in here. Okay, now this was a simple example of array destructuring in JavaScript. In this part, we are going to talk about set and maps in JavaScript. So before this, in JavaScript, we had just object and arrays collection. But now you can also use map and sets in JavaScript. So now let me show you first example of map. So what are maps? So map holds key value pairs, and it's similar to an array, but we can define our own index, and also indexes are unique in map. So now let me just show you the example. Let me just create a map, so I call it map, and you can use new map. You can use new map. So now our map is created, and now if you see console.log map, and let me just console.log this, you can see it is a type of map. The proto is map. Now you can add, now we are going to add some items to the map. So there are different functions that you can use. For example, the first one is set. So using set, you can set the values, a key value pair to the map. Let me just show you. You can just say set map.set, and we are going to just add name. So let me just add the name and map.set. So this is L name, and we have map.set email. Sorry, in set you cannot use this. Let me just remove this. Okay, and the email is, for example, let me just add an email like this. Okay, now you can get, so let me just say if you want to get the items, a key from here, you can just say console.log map, and you need to use .get. Okay, so .get. Now in here you need to add, for example, I want to get the name value, and if you see, we are receiving the name value. Also you can say console.log map.get, and I want to get the L name, and also let me just copy this and paste it in here. Also I want to get the email. Now if you run this, you can see that we are receiving our name, L name, and also email address. So there are some I have said that some functions that you can use. So we have used the set and also map. For example, if you want to check the existence of an item in your map, you can use has. So you can use just for example console.log and map.has, and I want to check, for example, the name. Okay, so the name, if I refresh, you'll see that I am receiving true because I have name in my map. If I change this to names, and if you see, you can see that I am receiving false because I don't have names in here. Also you can iterate over the over this map. So let me just show you, or first let me just show you. Also you can check the size of the map, so you can use console.log map.size, and if you see, this is the size of map. We have 3. This is the size of map. Now looping over the map, it's so simple, easy. We are using for off loop. Let me just show you. So for let element in map, and if you console.log the element, let me just do this. Okay guys, now it's not in, it's off, sorry. So now if you see, so you can see we are receiving this. Now if you want to access to every value, you can use, for example, if you see the zeroth index, and if you check, you can see we have the name, name and email. If you see the one, we have our this name, this is the last name, and this is the email. So now let me just make it a little bit using template literals. So let me just use backtick. So element 0 and element 1. Now if you see, you can see that this is our name, name, and this is our email. Okay, now let me just talk about map, about set. So we have saw map. Now sets are like arrays, but it stores unique value. Now it does not accept duplicate value, and it does not print that value. So now let me just show you an example of map. For example, let me just create a not map set. So you can use new set, and now we need to add data to the set. So you can use set.add, and for example, let me just add 1, and you can use set.add 2 and set.add 3, and let me just copy 4. Okay, now we have created the set object, and we have added these data to these values to our set. Now if you iterate over this set, so let me just for let element of set, and now if you say console.log the element, you can see that these are our values. If I add a duplicate value in here, now let me just set dot add, and let me just add 2 because I have 2 in here, and if you see, it's not accepting and it's not printing the duplicate value in our set like this. Also you can define set like this. So for example, let's set, and you can use new set, and you can just add an array of data to the set like this, and you can just use for let element and set and console.log the element. You will see that we are receiving the same out, or let me just check where's, oh sorry, all time I'm using in, so for off, and if you see, we are receiving the same result. Now also you can find the size of the set, so you can just say console.log and set dot size, and if you see, the size is 5. And also you can do you can check the existence of a value in the set. You can use the has. So console.log set.has. So I want to check that if there is 2, and if you check, I should receive true. Set has is not a function. Oh sorry, it's not. We need to add has to like this. Okay, now let me just, and this is a problem. Let me just check it again. Okay, now let me just do .has, and if you see, you can see that we are receiving true because we have this item in here. Also, if you check, for example, for 9, because we don't have this in here, you can see we are receiving false. In this part, we're going to talk about classes in JavaScript. Now, older versions of JavaScript supported classes, but without using the class keyword. Now you can write object-oriented codes in JavaScript using class keywords. Now, first we're going to see that how we can create classes in older way. To create a class in the older way, we need to write a constructor function. Now this constructor function looked much like any other function syntax. So for example, let me just create function display. So it's a class, it's not a function. And if we see that when we are going to create a class in the older way, we need to just give this first letter capitalized. Now, so let me just say this dot car, or let me change this to name, it will be good. So this dot name to name. And now if I create the object of my this display class, so let me say my name and new display, and you can add a name in here. Now if I console.log my name, you'll see that I am receiving my name in here. And if you see, the proto is object, and if you see further, it's a constructor function. Now let me convert this with the new version of classes that we have in ES6. Okay, now in here I'm going to just create a class display, and in this class now I'm going to just create a constructor. So constructor, and I'm going to pass the name in here. Now this dot name. Okay, now if I create the object of my this display class, so let me just create, for example, let my name and new display, and let me just add John Doe in here. And if I console.log my name, you will see that I am receiving so let me just check the syntax error. Yeah, sorry. Okay, now you can see that we are receiving our name in here, and the proto, and you can see that it's a class display. So now a constructor in here, you can see we have created a constructor. Now a constructor is called when an instance of our class is created. Now in here we have created the instance of our class. When we create the instance of this class, now this constructor will be called that we have received our name John Doe in this section. So now also you can add, for example, if you want, you can add methods in your class. For example, in here I'm going to just create a method. Let me just call it greeting, like this. Okay, and this is just let me just console.log and hello from method class. Okay, now because if I see the result in here, I will not receive this hello from method class, because when you create the object of your class, you need to call your this greeting method in here. So it's not like constructor. For the constructor we don't need to call, because by default it will be called, but when we are going to create a method, we need to call our that method in here. So you can just simply say for example, let me just make it in here. So console.log, so it's my object of my class, or the instance of my class, and I can say greeting. Now if I run this, you can see that I am receiving hello from method class in here. And also I don't need this greeting console.log because I have already done this. You can just say my name dot greeting, and because I've already created the console.log in here, and if I run this, you can see that we are receiving hello from method class. Even you can do it more better, and let me just remove this, and in here I'm going to use template literals, so like this, and I'm going to just say welcome, and this dot name. So now if I see, I'm receiving welcome John Doe. So this John Doe is from my constructor that I have already created, and I have access to that. So I have access to this variable using this dot name. In this part, we are going to talk about static functions or methods in JavaScript. So static functions are defined on the class itself and not on the prototype. So it means that we cannot call a static function or a method on the object, but we can call it on the class name. So let me just show you an example. For example, I have a class display, and I have a constructor in here. Let me pass name in here, and I can say this dot name, okay, like this. Now let me just also create a static function in here. I call it greeting, and in here I'm going to just say console.log, and I'm going to say hello from static. Now if I create the object of my display class, so let me say let my name new display, and let me just add a name in here, and if I say console.log my name, you will see that I'm receiving the name in here because we are using constructor. Now if you see in here, we have a static greeting. Now if I use my object or my instance to get access to this greeting, let me just show you my name dot greeting. Now if I see the result, you can see that I'm receiving an error in here because we have used a static in here. Now when you are using static with your functions, you cannot access that, or you cannot get that through your object. You need to call your, for example, your class name. So if I say let me just comment this, and if I say display dot greeting, and if I see the result, you can see that we are receiving hello from a static. So like this, you can declare static functions in your class in JavaScript. In this part, I want to show you that how you can use getters and setters in JavaScript. So getters and setters allow us to run the code on the reading or writing of a property. So let me show you just an example. For example, we have a class display, and in here I'm going to just create my constructor, and let me just add name in here, and this dot name. Okay, now you can set a property for this. For example, I'm going to just say set name, and this is so this dot underscore name to name. So in here I have used underscore name prefix. It's because I want to create a temp field to store name property. By this reason I have used underscore name, and this was the set name. Now for the get name, you can just say get name, and we are going to just return So this dot underscore name, like this. Okay, so now let me just create the object of my display. So let me just call it let display, and new display, let me just add for example John Doe in here. And now if I console.log display, and I call my dot name, so it was the set name. Now if you see display, let me just check that where is the problem. We have received undefined. So let display, new display, John Doe. Okay guys, it's because I have a wrong misspelling in the constructor, so let me just use it like this constructor. Now if you see the result, you can see that we have received John Doe. So like this you can use getters and setters in JavaScript. In this part we are going to talk that how you can use class inheritance in JavaScript, and also how you can do method overriding in JavaScript. So first of all, let me just create a class animal in here, and in the constructor let me just say name, and this dot name. Now after this, let me just create a method of speak in here, and in this method of speak I'm going to just say console.log, and let me use backticks. So this dot name make nice. Okay, so now this is our base class. Now we are going to just create another class that extends from this class. Now this class, let me just call it dog, and you can use extends for class inheritance in JavaScript, and I want to extend from the animal class. Now we need to add a constructor in here, so constructor, and also let me pass the name in this section. Okay, now so this is my constructor. Now I need to just say super. The super will invoke the constructor of our base class. Okay, now you can see this is just a class, and now because we have extended this class from the animal class, now by this dog class can access to this speak method that we have in our base class. Because when you extend or inherit from a base class, you can access to all attributes and methods of that class. So now let me just show you practically. I'm going to just create the object of my dog, so let me just say new dog, and let me just add, for example, dog. And then now if I say console.log dog.speak, so you can see I don't have this speak in my this dog class. I don't have this, but I have this in my speak in my animal class, in my base class. Now if I see the result, you can see dog make noise, and this make noise is from this our base class that we have, speak base class that we have in here, speak method that we have in here. Now also you can do method overriding. For example, if you want to change the functionality of this speak, you can just override this method. So you can just add this. Let me just copy this and paste this in here, and now instead of make noise, I'm going to say barking, like this. Okay, now in here first thing, let me just comment this, and you can just use dog.speak, and now if I see the result, you can see dog is barking. So like this you can use inheritance and also method overriding in JavaScript. In this part we're going to talk about exponentiation operator. Now this operator rises the first operand to the power of the second operand. and it is JavaScript ES7 or ECMAScript 2016 feature, and it was introduced for JavaScript ES7, and the ES7 JavaScript was introduced in 2016. So let me just show you this operator, or this symbol. So for example, I'm going to say console.log, and I want to do 3 to the power of, for example, 2. Now if you see the result, you will receive the result like this. You can see that we are receiving 9. Now also you can, for example, if you want to console.log, for example, for to the power of 2, and if you see, we will receive 16 for this. Then we can see that we have received 16 for this. So this was exponentiation operator in JavaScript ES7. In this part, we are going to talk about the promises in JavaScript. So promises was introduced in ES6 to handle asynchronous programming. Before promises, async calls were handled by callbacks held in JavaScript. So now a promise is basically an object that is created when we are unsure that the assigned task will be completed or not. And also the promise object represents the completion or failure of an async operation and its resulting value. Let me just give you an example first. For example, I'm saying that I promise that I complete Python programming language in 1 month. Now this is a promise, but maybe I will not complete this. So also there are different states for a promise. We have 3 different states for a promise. The first state is the pending state. Now if an asynchronous function has not completed its task, the promise it returned will be in the pending state. So if the task is not resolved or not rejected, it is in the pending mode or pending state. The second state that we have, that's called resolved. Now whenever the asynchronous function completes successfully, it will set the promise into the resolved state. Now the resolved state is the successful state that the task is completed. The third state that we have, that's reject state. Now if an asynchronous function finishes with an error, then it sets the promise into the rejected state, and there are rejected state. So this will be if we receive if the task has not been completed, this will be a rejected state. Also there are 2 callbacks that are the part of promises in a chain. We have then, so the then function is used to receive and process the data, and we have catch. Now the catch function is used to receive and process an error. Then is used for processing data, and catch is used for processing the error. So now let's just create an example. We are going to describe this by doing an example. Okay, so let me just create let's complete it. So by default I'm going to just make it true. Now I'm going to just create a promise. So let my promise, and you need to create the object of the promise. You can simply write new promise. Now this promise will take takes executor function. That executor function takes 2 function arguments. So for example, let me just say function in here, and now in here we need to add 2 function argument. So the first one is resolve, so resolve, and the second one is reject, like this. Okay, now I'm going to check. So let me just say if completed. So if my task is completed, I'm going to just say resolve and say that the promise has been completed. And in the else case, I'm going to just reject the promise has not been completed. Okay, so now in here we are going to check. By default, if you see the completed is true. Now if our task is completed, we are going to just say resolve. Right now we don't have any pending state in here. First, let me just show you this example, and after that we will work on the pending state. So now if I say console.log, and let me just call this my promise, and let me just check. We have an error, line 10, new promise. Okay guys, we have a problem in the syntax. Let me just cut this, and in here I need to just make it like let me just remove this, and now in here I'm going to just add this. Okay, now let me just run it again. Now you can see our promise is resolved, and you can see the promise has been completed. Now if you check, the promise is status is resolved, and the promise value is the promise has been completed. Now if I change the completed to false, now in this case we should receive the reject. So now let me just see the result. So let me just save it and run it. Okay, now you can see the promise rejected, the promise has not been completed, and this is a warning that we are receiving from the JavaScript. We will handle this when we started then and catch. Okay, so now you can see the promise status is rejected, and the promise value is the promise has not been completed. Okay, so now this was a simple example, but we have not done the state, the pending state in here. And now we are going to just do our pending state. Let me just comment this code, and let me just comment this. Okay, now I'm going to just create let completed, and by default I'm going to just make it to true. So let me just copy some codes, or let me just write, okay, my promise, a new promise, and in here we need to pass function, executor function that takes two function arguments. So the first one is resolve, and the second one is reject. Okay, now in here we need to use set timeout. So set timeout. Now in here we are going to check that if completed, if the task is completed, we are going to just resolve. Let me just add this, resolve. And in the else case, we are going to just reject. So let me just copy this and paste it in here. So now also we need to just set the timeout. So I'm going to just use 3 milliseconds. Okay, now if I console.log so let me just console.log my promise. So in the first step, because the completed is true, it should resolve. So let me just run this. So now you can see we have a pending promise. Now if I write my promise in here, so my promise, my promise. Now you can see that the promise has been completed. Let me just clear the console and let me do this again. Okay, so now you can see the promises and the pending, and this will decide that the promise should be completed or the promise should be rejected. Now if I say my promise, you can see the promise is resolved and the promise has been completed. Now if I change this to false like this, and let me just remove this, and let me just and now if I say my promise, now you can see we are receiving the promise has not been completed. And if you see, by default the value of promise is undefined. If you check my promise, okay, right now we have rejected. Okay, let me just check this, show you the value of the. So let me just remove this. Now let me just refresh this, and if I show you, now you can see the promise value is undefined and it's pending. So it will wait for 3 milliseconds, and after that it will take the decision to just resolve the promise or reject the promise. Also, I have said that you can use then and catch callbacks. Let me just show you an example of that. So I have this example. Let me just make it true. And now in here I'm going to just create another function. So let me just call this console.log, comment this console.log. I'm going to just create a function and call the promise report, and it will take a promise, and now I can say promise dot then, and in here I can just say result console.log, and let me just use the template literals in here. So result, and the result is result, and for dot catch, let me just copy this and paste it in here. Let me change this to catch, so it will process the data dot then, and the catch will handle the errors that we have. So let me change this to error, and this is error, and let me add the error in here. Okay, so now let me just create the example of this. Now I'm going to just say console.log, and in here I'm going to just my promise report, and in the promise report I need to add my promise like this. Okay, so now if I check unexpected token on line 63, let me just check, just remove this. Okay, so you can see it's in the pending, and the result, in the first it was in the pending because undefined is the value state for the pending, and after the 3 seconds it will goes to result, so the promise has been completed. Okay, so you can see, let me just run it again. And the first it is in the pending, and it will wait for 3 seconds, and after that it give me the result, so the promise has been completed. Now if I change this to for example false, let me just change this to false, and if I run it again, first state is undefined. Now it will wait for 3 seconds. After that I'm getting error, the promise has not been completed. So like this you can use promise. Now we are going to work on a real example that how you can use that. Okay guys, now let's do a practical example. I'm going to just remove all of these codes, and in here I'm going to just create a function. I call it get URL like this, and I'm going to pass URL as parameter. Okay, now the first thing I need, I'm going to just first return a new promise or create a new promise. So let me just say return a new promise, and it will take an executor function. and we need to add two function arguments for this. The first one is resolve and the second one is reject. Okay, now after this, the first thing we need to create an XML request. So let me just say let request or rec new XML HTTP request. Now after this, after doing this, we need to open our URL. So request.open. We are using get method, and we need to add our URL in here because we want to open our URL. Now after doing this, now when the page is loaded, what we want to do, so rec.onload, and we are going to just call this function when the page is loaded. And okay, now when the page is loaded, we are going to check that if our status is 200 and if it was a successful request. So status is 200. We are going to just resolve the promise with the response text. So we are going to just say resolve request.response, and in the else case, so if it was unsuccessful, we are going to just reject with the status text. So we are going to say reject and error request dot status text. Okay, now after this also we need to handle the network errors. Now we are going to just do that in here, handle network errors, and in here we are going to just say reject and sorry, not reject, we are going to just say request dot on error, and we are going to create a function, and in here we are going to just say reject error, and we are going to say network error. Okay, at the end we need to make our response. So in here we need to just make the response. Simply we can say rec.send. Okay, now we have created this. After this, now we need to call our this get URL function that we have already created. Also I'm using this because I'm going to just do API call, so I'm using this JSON placeholder. This is fake on our REST API for testing and prototyping. Okay, now if you come down and here we are going, you can use, so let me just use the comments, so the comments API, and in here we are going to just copy this. Okay, so first let me just create my get URL in here, and I'm going to pass this in this section, and after that I'm just using then and function, and we need to add our response in here, and we are going to just say console.log success, and we need to add our response in here. And let me just create for the error, so function error, and we are going to just say console.log or console.error, not log, failed, and we are saying error. Okay, so now if I refresh my page, okay, now you can see that I have received the, so you can see that this is success, and there's a post ID, this is name, and this is the comments that we have gotten. So like this you can work with the promise in JavaScript. In this part we are going to talk about the includes function. So JavaScript it was a new feature in JavaScript ES7, or we can call it JavaScript ES 2016. So JavaScript ES7 was introduced in 2016 year, and the includes function or method returns true if an array includes a value, and if not, it will return a false. So let me just show you an example. I have an array, so let me just give it some numbers in here, and I can check that if a number is included here, so dot includes, and I want to check the 2. So you can see I'm receiving true because the 2 is in my array. If I change this to, for example, 0, I will receive false because I don't have the 0 in my this array. So also you can do with the string. So let me just say let names, and I have some names like this, and let me just give some names. And now we can check, so console.log names.include, and if I check, for example, my name, and let me just see, names include is not a function, include, sorry, and now you can see it's true. Now if I remove 1 from here, and if I check, you can see that I'm receiving false. Like this you can use includes method or function in JavaScript. In this video I want to show you that how you can use PadStart method in JavaScript. So PadStart was introduced in ES8 JavaScript. It's the features from the ES8, and ES8 or ECMAScript 2017 was released in 2017. So the PadStart method pads a string with another string at the beginning. So now let me just show you an example. For example, I have let name like this, and I want to add some, for example, characters at the start of this name. So I'm going to just say console.log, and I can say name.PadStart, and I'm going to just I want to add 10, and so the character I want to add D. So I have 6 characters in here, and before this I want to add 4 more characters that it became 10. So now if you see, you can see that I am receiving 4D and also my name. If you change this to 12, you will see that we are receiving 6D in our in here. So like this you can use PadStart in JavaScript. Also you can use PadEnd in JavaScript ES8. So this method pads a string with another string and makes the resulting string reach a given line. So using PadEnd, you can add for example a character to the end of a string. So now let me just show you. This was PadStart, and let me just comment this, and okay, now let me just copy this and paste it in here. So if you see the result of our PadStart, this was at the beginning of the string. Now if you want to add at the end of the string, you can use PadEnd. So let me just change this to PadEnd. Let me just make it 10, and if you see, you can see that we are receiving this at the end. So let me change this to n and change this to 12, and you can see that we are receiving these characters at the end of our text. In this part, we are going to create an example of Object.Entries. So it is a feature from the ES8 JavaScript, and it's used for returning an array that contains the key value pairs of a given object as an array. So now let me just show you the example of this. For example, I have an object of Const info. And now let me just add name in here. I have L name, and I have email, and I have a phone. So like this. Okay, so now you can use object.entry for returning of an array, so that each array will have a key value pair. So you can simply write console.log and object.entries, and in here we are going to just add our info. Now if you see the result, entries is not defined. Sorry, it is dot entries. Okay, now you can see we have 4 array, and if you see we have a key value pair array. So this is our first array, 0 index array. This is the value, and the length is 2, and this is our another array. This is our second index and third index. So like this, you can use object.entries to return an array of a key value pair object. In this part, we are going to create an example of objects.value. So it is features on an ES8. So by objects.value, you can get objects property values. So for example, if I have an object in here, let me just create info, and I have a name in here. I have L name, and I have for example email, and also let me just add a phone also. Okay, now let me just get the values, the property values from this object. You can just use console.log object.values, and I need to pass the info in here. Now if you see the result, let me just run it. You can see that I have extracted the value of the properties in here. So this is the name, and this is the last name, email, and also this is the phone number. So like this, you can use object.values in JavaScript. In this part, we're going to talk about a trailing comma. Now, trailing comma is allowed in an array object and function parameters. So in the past, when you add a comma, you will receive an error. So let me just show you an example. For example, I have an array of const number. Now if I add 1, 2, 3 or 4, and after that if I add a comma, so there is no problem. And if I say console.log number, and you will see that I am receiving my array in here. like this. Okay, now if you for example, you can do in function. For example, I have a function add, and if I add two parameters a, b, and if I add a comma, now this is no problem in here. And you can just let me just return a plus b, and if I say console.log add, and if I add two values in here, and you will see that I'm not getting an error, so I'm receiving 9 in this section. So also you can use trailing commas with the object. For example, I have const names and const name, and in here let me just say this const info, and I have name, and I have L name. So now if I add a comma in here, there is no problem, and I can just simply say console.log, and I can just say info, and if you see there is no problem in here. So like this you can use trailing commas in JavaScript. In this part we are going to talk about async and await functionality in JavaScript. So ES8 come up with async and await keywords which can be used to asynchronous functionality in JavaScript. So when an async function is called, it returns a promise, and when the async function returns a value, the promise will be resolved with the returned value. When the async function throws an exception, the promise will be rejected with the thrown value. Also, it's important to mention that async function works on top of the promises, and they use promises to return the results. And also you need to remember that async function and await works together. You can use await only inside async function, and if you use the await outside the function or outside the async function, it will throw an error. Also, await allows us to pause execution of async function and wait until the promise is resolved, either as fulfilled or rejected. So now when you want to create an async function, let me just show you. So if I say function and function name, so for example in here I'm going to just say console.log hello world. Okay, now this is just a simple function, a regular function on JavaScript. If I call this function, so and you will see the result that I am receiving the hello world. Now if you add an async in here, now it's not a regular function, it's an async function. And if you run this and in here if you say if you say for example function name, and you can see that this is a promise and this is a resolved, the status is resolved and the value is undefined. So like this you can create an asynchronous function. So also you can do this through an arrow function. Let me just comment this. For example, you can, if you want to define an async function using arrow function, you can just simply say const, and in here you need to add your function name and like this, and after that you need to add async, and this is an arrow function, and in here you are going to do your function body, and especially you are going to do your await asynchronous functionality in here. So like this you can define an asynchronous function using an arrow function. So now let me just show you, let me just comment this. And for example, if you have an async function, and let me just async function, and this is a function name, and in here you can just create your await in the body of the async function. So for example, you can say await. So let me just create link async result. I call async result, and you can use await, and this is our async function that let me write our async function. Okay, now also you can just simply return the async result. So return async result. Okay, now if you remove this async, because we have said that await this await works inside the our async function, asynchronous function. Now if you remove the async from here, and if you refresh your page, you can see we're receiving await is only valid in async function, and if I make it async, we will not receive any error like this. Okay, so and if you see function name, okay, right now because we if you see it's a promise, and right now it's not defined, our async function is not defined because we have not defined this function yet, but it's working. So also you can use multiple await. For example, we have in here a result await, and the best thing is that you can just create another await in here, and this is for example result 2, and this is our asynchronous function 2, and you can just return the result 1 plus result 2. And now once all await are resolved, for example we have this await in here, when it's resolved it will resolve now the resolved will be resolved or rejected, and after the result of this this will be also resolved. Now once all await are resolved in async function, it will be considered as a completed, and the first async function may have a promise, or could be using a promise object, that the rest will simply await till the previous one is resolved. Now let me just show you the example of async functionality using a promise chain. So let me comment this. Okay, for example, I have a promise in here. Let me say function, and this is my promise, and now we are going to just return new promise in here, and let me just add resolve, and in here I'm going to just set a timeout. So set timeout, and let me just add 3000 millisecond or 3 milliseconds. So now we have created our promise. Now let me just create my async function in here. So let me just use async function, and let me just give it our message. Let me call it our message, and in here I'm going to just create const message, and I'm going to just use await my promise. Now using this, we are going to say that please wait until the promise has been resolved or rejected, and it will wait to the rejection or resolving of this promise. Now if I say console.log and message, so let me just use template literals in here, backtick, message, now let me just call our message in here, and now if I refresh this, and if I write our message in here, you can see that right now the promise is in the pending, and it's not resolved. Okay guys, now you can see it's pending. It's because we need to, in the set timeout, we need to resolve the promise. So you can say that promise is resolved like this. Okay, so now if I run this and if I say, now you can see that message promise is resolved. Now after 3 milliseconds it will resolve that. So if I run it again, and after, you can see the message is resolved. And if you see our message in here, you can see, now you can see in the first it was pending, and after it pending, now the promise is resolved. Now in here we have just used one asynchronous one promise. Now if you change the promise and if you add some more, it will be good. So when you have multiple steps, there will be the power of the async function. For example, you will have some promise in here. So let me just write the code in here. Let me just comment this, and let me just add, let me just paste the code. Okay, now you can see in here we have 3 promises. So first promise, and the timeout is, this is the timeout, and this is the resolved. Also I have another one, it's second promise, and the same, and just this is the, we have bring changes in here. And also we have another one, this is the third promise, and let me just make it 500. And now we are going to just create our async function, and in here we are going to first await first promise, and when it's resolved we are going to just take the second promise, and after that the third promise. Now let me, and in here I have just console.log the first second using template literals, and in here I have called my function. So now if you run this, you can see that first promise resolved, second promise resolved, and this is the third promise. And if you see your message in here, so message, and you can see that in the first, the promise was in the pending, after that it's resolved, the first promise, second promise, and also this is our third promise. Now let me just show you a practical example. And so for example, I'm going to just create an async, so async function, and let me just get user, let me just add name in here, and in here I'm going to just create let response, and I'm using await, and I'm going to just fetch the username from the GitHub API. So let me just add template literals in here like this. So this is the API GitHub, and this we are going to just, when we add any name in here, when we call the function, we're going to just retrieve that name. And after this we need to create let data, and we are going to convert our data to the JSON, so response.json. So in here it will first fetch the data, and it will wait until the fetching of the data, and after it fetch the data it will take the data as a JSON, and we are going to just return the data in here. Okay, now in here if I just get the user, and if I add my name in here, dot then data console.log the data like this. Okay, so now let me just run this. So this data, this then is for processing of data. If you want to catch the error, you can just add catch in here, catch in here for catching of the error. Okay, now let me just see it in the console. Now you can see that this is, we have received our information in here like this. So like this you can work with async and await, and